This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, I really don't understand why that lady has to tell us this conference is now about to be. I wish there was a way I could turn that off. But every week she tells us that it's being recorded. So, hey, this week we're back in 1 Samuel, and we're in the 14th chapter of 1 Samuel. And what I wanted to open up with today is just courage. And what's the most courageous thing that you can think of that you've seen someone do? I was thinking about that because this chapter that we're going to be looking at, it really does show something courageous. And I know that so often we think of people that are courageous or people that are in a war or in a battle or they do something like that, and that is very courageous to do something like that in the midst of the potential of being hurt or killed. But most of us don't run across that type of opportunity every day. But I think we can be courageous in many things. I think that we can be courageous in going to talking to somebody that has wronged us and going and talking to them and trying to work it out. I think we can be courageous by forgiving someone that has hurt us. We can be courageous by going up to somebody and admitting that we're wrong. There are many things that show courage, and courage, it's not a lack of fear. Courage is while you're still afraid, you still do what you feel that God is calling you to do. And so I think there's so many things that we can be courageous about. And that's what this Bible study is going to be about today. It's going to be about Jonathan, who showed courage in the midst of what was going on in the battles with the Philistines. But when you think about that, what have you seen that was courageous? And my wife's on here, and hi Jody. But I remember one of the most courageous things I've ever seen Jody do is when we were pregnant with our daughter Christian, who ended up passing away. But I remember that when the doctors came in and they asked us, they said, "Hey, if it comes down to us saving the baby or saving Jody, what do you want to do?" And Jody didn't think about it very long at all, and she said, "Save the baby." And as I think back on that, I just think of that was a very courageous thing to do. And it's really something that a question you don't ever want to be asked. But I just remember thinking how courageous that was. And I think some of the most courageous things I've done in my life has been when I come to the defense of people that might be wronged or in a bad situation, and I come to their defense and maybe speak with someone, or and I'm just thinking of a couple of instances of that over my life where I literally was terrified and nervous and afraid, and but I just knew it was right, and I knew it was what God would have me do in that time, in that place. So I just invite you all to think about times in your life, examples of people being courageous, and times where you might have shown courage. But it doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means that in the midst of that fear, you still do what you feel God asks you to do. So we're going to be in, if you got your phones or your Bibles, you can pull them up. We're going to be in 1 Samuel 14. We're going to be doing the first 23 verses today. So hopefully it won't take us forever to do this, but doing the first 23 verses. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for those of you that are joining online, so you'll be able to see it. And then, so we're in 1 Samuel 14. I'm going to be going through 1 through 23. And I'm looking at the ESV version today instead of the NLT, because there's two places in particular where I believe the ESV does a better job than the NLT. And one of them is very important, so I decided to just copy it over in the ESV today. So if you pull it up on your phones, look at the ESV version, because that way you'll be able to follow with me a little bit better. But so verse 1. So one day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. So we got some people we need to be introduced to here. We know who Jonathan is. We know that Jonathan is the son of Saul. We met him, and he did a tremendously courageous thing 2 chapters ago when he went and routed the Philistines at a garrison. And it really kind of started this whole battle thing that was going on with Philistines. And Saul had to gather the troops and all this. But Jonathan is a great guy. And as we learn later in this book, we know that Jonathan and David become just lifelong friends, and he's very loyal. And so that's who Jonathan is. Jonathan has been in the midst of Saul this whole time. So when we think of Jonathan, we have to understand that Jonathan has heard everything that Saul has heard. So when Saul was anointed king, Jonathan was there and heard his dad being anointed king, and what Samuel said over Saul, and said, "This is your job and this is what you're to be doing." And Jonathan knows that. And Jonathan knows that as the son of Saul, he was in line to be the king, and that was so Saul's responsibilities were also his responsibilities. But Jonathan was also there in the last chapter when his dad did things wrong, and Samuel came to him and said, the kingship is going to be removed from you. God has already chosen somebody else, to a man after his own heart, talking about David. So Jonathan also knew that his dad didn't obey God and do what God wanted him to do. So he's kind of stuck in this middle of trying to honor his dad, but also wanting to do what God wants to do. And as we learn, Jonathan is a stellar example of somebody that is courageous and does what God wants them to do. And then there's this young man who carried his armor, the armor bearer. So you two guys in here, we need to come up with a name for this young man who carried his armor. What do we want to name this guy? Any suggestions, Robbie? We need to just come up with a fake name. What do y'all think? Is somebody saying something online?
Gary.
Gary? All right, Gary. There you go. We got Jonathan and Gary. So Jonathan and Gary. That's who the two are in this story. We really don't know if that's his name. Aaron just made that up. But Jonathan comes to him and he says, "Hey, let's go to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. And I think that's interesting. He says he did not tell his father. So why didn't he not tell his father? I think there's probably a couple of reasons why. One, he didn't tell his father because he didn't want his father to tell him no, that you can't do it, and stop him. "I'm the king. You're not going over there. You're not doing that." He didn't tell his father because the last time he did it and went over to a garrison and wiped out that garrison and took it over, he came back and his dad took credit for it. So maybe that was something that Jonathan was like, I'm not gonna, my dad took credit of the last time I won a battle. So, I don't really think it was that. I think the main thing is that he had just witnessed Samuel correcting his dad and telling him about 3 specific things that he had done wrong in the last chapter. And I think he probably didn't tell his dad because he knew that his dad hadn't been doing exactly what God had wanted him to do, but Jonathan knew what he was supposed to do. And one of the things, I'll pull it up on my phone real quick, but in Scripture, if I can't find it real quick, I'm sorry, but I think it's in 1 Samuel 8. I don't remember exactly where it was, but this is when they're telling people, "Give us a king, give us a king," and the Lord says, "Okay, give him a king." And when he does that, he says, "As you're going to be king, one of the things that you're supposed to do is that you are supposed to remove the Philistines from this land, remove the invaders and the people from this land. So Jonathan knew that God, when his dad was anointed king, that one of the things that God wanted him to do was he wanted him to remove the Philistines and the people out of the promised land. And at this point, Saul's really not doing anything. He won this last battle, but he did it in a way that he shouldn't have. And so now he's at this point where he's not doing anything. And Jonathan says, I know your job. Your job is to go and to remove these people from the land. So I think Jonathan was saying, I know what the task is for the king. So I feel a little bit of that responsibility. So I'm going to go do it. So that might be another reason why he didn't tell his dad. And he went over there. But so verse 2, let's get to verse 2. It says, Saul was staying outside on the outskirts of Gibeah in the pomegranate cave at Migron. And this is one where I disagree. It's really not a cave. It's called it's a high point more than it is a cave. It's just a high point is what the better translation for that word. And it said he was at this pomegranate. And when you really look at the Hebrew there, he was sitting in the shade of this pomegranate. And he's in this place where he's overlooking everything that's going on. The context of this place where they're having this battle is we talked about it last week. And the Philistines are up toward Michmash, which is kind of towards the north and east. And then Geba is more towards the south and towards the west. And there's only about a mile in between it. And as I was driving in from Lamesa today, I kept looking out about a mile in front of me just to see what you could see from a mile apart. So the Philistines were gathered to the north at Michmash. Geba was gathered to the south. And where Saul was, he was on this high point. He was on this high point and he was overlooking, and he was sitting underneath this pomegranate tree in the shade. And I think it's interesting that they use pomegranate, because was it a pomegranate tree? It might have been a pomegranate tree, but the symbolism in this time of pomegranate, it would be a symbol of fertility, a symbol of success, a symbol of prosperity. And I think the author here, what the author is trying to do is he was saying that Saul was staying in this high place, or in this cave, as this word says, but he's staying in this cave and he's being successful. He's being protected. He's in this cave where he's protected by this cave, or he's on this high place where he can see people coming, and that's also a place of protection. So what it's saying is Saul is kind of about himself. It's about, he wants to be seen as someone that is successful, and he wants to protect himself. So that's where he is at this place in Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men. So his troops, they started out at 600, then they swelled to this huge number, and now it's back down to 600 if you look back over the last couple of chapters. So he didn't have a whole lot of people. And we got to remember that the Philistines, we described their army last week. Their army was described as one that was as numerous as the sands in the seas. It was this huge army. And here Saul is, and he has 600 men. So in verse 3, it says, including Ahijah, the son of Anitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. So if we remember in the last story, Samuel got mad and he left because Saul started the battle and started seeking the offering sacrifices to God before the prophet of God was there, Samuel. And that was the major sin, one of the major sins that he did. So he surrounds himself with this people. He surrounds himself with Ahijah, who's the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli. And if you remember when we first started this Bible study, Phinehas was bad. He was there at Shiloh where the tabernacle was, and Phinehas and his brother were so bad that was one of the main reasons why God took the priesthood away from Eli and gave it to Samuel. So the question I would want to ask here is, why in the world is Saul associating with someone who no longer has the priestship in his line? It was taken on. Phinehas, if you remember, he died in battle with his brother. And when they got back into town, that's when Eli fell over. He was so big and fat, he fell over and he killed himself when he was sitting at the city gates when he heard that the Ark of the Covenant was captured. So why would Saul surround himself with someone that clearly was not being used by the Lord? It says here, the priest of the Lord, he said, and he had this ephod on. And the ephod is a way in which it's kind of like this chest piece kind of deal. And it's also the way in which they communicated with God. And they tried to hear the will of God. So I think the possible answers of that are that, one, Saul really didn't want to hear from God. He didn't want to hear what God had to say, because the last time he talked to Samuel, Samuel didn't share very good news with him. So it was almost like he's making himself look good. So he says, oh, I still have a priest here, and it's this Ahijah guy. And so I still look good. But the reality is he knew that that wasn't the priest of God, and he was surrounding himself. And all this is going on, and nobody knew that Jonathan had gone. Jonathan was probably, second in command of all of the troops. He governed over stuff, and nobody so it wasn't like they were sitting around talking about, oh, we're going to do this battle, we're going to do that battle, this is our strategy, how are we going to defend? Because the person that was probably second in command wasn't even there, and they didn't know it. So what they're saying, what the author's saying here in verses 2 and 3 is that Saul was all about looking successful and protecting himself, and he really wasn't about doing what God had called him to do, and that was to rid the land of the Philistines. So let's go to verse 4. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other side. The name of one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Sheena. Okay, so remember that there's a mile between these two towns, and the Philistines are on the Michmash sides, the Israelites are on the other side, and it's just a mile away. So you can see a mile away. I did it all the way from Lubbock to Lamesa today. I kept looking at how far a mile was, and you can see people on the ground. You can see everything. I mean, so it's not that far. And in between that is there's these two crags or cliffs that go down, and this river goes through. If I'll carry this around and show it to the people that are here, but if you look at this map, see there's Michmash and Geba, and there's that river going through there. So the crags that they're talking about are these steep cliffs that on this map right here, you can see that it's right there. So there's these cliffs that go down, there's a river that goes, but if you're looking at it, you just you kind of see a little top and then it dives down, and then you see the other side coming up, and then you see the people. So it's just a half mile in front of you, and then another half mile is where the bad guys are, or the enemies are.
Kind of like that gate at Boston Kingdom before they filled it up.
Okay, Hell's Gate.
Yeah, had the great big huge
Yeah.
on either side.
Yeah. So okay, yeah. Robbie just shared that it's kind of like the cliffs that are at Possum Kingdom before they flooded it and filled it up with water. But yeah, so that's what we're looking at. It's just this little indention going down, and that's where they were. So so Jonathan's there, and what he wants to do is he wants to go over to the Philistine garrison. On that map, it would be more towards the east there on that map. So there's the crag, and then there's a Philistine garrison right at the top of that, and that's where they were going to go, and that's where he wanted to go. He said there's a rocky crag on one side and rocky crag on the other. One was Bozez, And what that means is it's shiny. So a shiny crag. So there was some sort of rocks there that were just real sharp and slick, and it made when the sun hit off of it, it reflected and it was shiny. So that's why they named that cliff that. And the other one was Sina, and what that means is thorny. So one side is kind of all this rocky and shiny, hard. I don't know what type of it would be, but kind of real rocky. And then the other side has a bunch of thorns on it. It's real nasty. So that's what it is. One crag rose from the north in front of Michmash, and the other rose from the south in front of Geba. So that's where he was. And there's the map again. So in verse 6, he says, Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. There's a lot to talk about here. So he says, come, let us go over to that garrison. You can see it. It's right there. See that little fort that's built up around it and the people walking around it? That's where we're going to go. We're going to go half a mile over there, and we're going to take care of those guys. So it's not a long distance. It's like we're going right over there. And it kind of amazes me that his dad didn't see him leaving. When his dad's at this high point and supposed to be looking out, seeing what's going on in the valley, and he doesn't see his son walking across the field that's just half a mile away to go over to this place. He said, let's go over there to these uncircumcised. So the next thing is, it says these uncircumcised. So in the Old Testament, when you were circumcised, it means that you accepted the terms of the covenant of God. So you were on God's side, and you were wanting to do what God wants you to do. So when it says uncircumcised here, in other translations, it might say heathens or pagans, but essentially what it means is those that are against God. So he says, hey, we're going to go to that garrison, to the people that are against God, and that's where we're going to go. It may be that the Lord will work for us. And he's not saying, let's go out there and try to manipulate God into acting for us. It's not like when Phineas and his brother carried the Ark of the Covenant out into battle. They treated it like a lucky rabbit's foot or something. Oh, if we carry this out there, maybe God will show up. I mean, they were going out there by themselves, just two of them, and essentially they're saying, we believe that if we go out there, God will do something. And this verse that it says here, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving the many, or saving by many or by few. And this is a quote from Leviticus. And Jonathan, being an Israelite young man, he had memorized the first 5 books of the Bible. So he knew this, and essentially he was quoting this verse in Leviticus that says something to the effect of 5 people can beat hundreds, and hundreds can beat thousands, and and that God can do so much that it's just amazing. So he knows that verse, and he's requoting it here, but he also knows the story of Gideon. Do y'all remember Gideon in the Judges? I think it's Judges chapter 7. But Gideon was a judge, and he was fighting a very large enemy. And I think it said that he was fighting 135,000 people were in the army that he was fighting. And Gideon gathered his troops together, and the Lord said, man, you don't need all those troops. And said, tell them if any of y'all are scared to go home. So he said, hey, if any of y'all are scared, go home. And 2/3 of the people of Gideon's troops left. And God said, no, that's still too many. Send them down to the creek and have them get a drink out of the creek. And the ones that just get into the creek and they just drink it straight out of the creek, send them home. But the ones that gather the water and kind of lap it like that, then we're going to keep them. And after they did that, they sent all the ones that went home that just drank straight out of the water, and the ones that lapped it up in their hands, he kept them. And that was 300 people. So Gideon took an army of 300 people into a force and fought a force of 135,000, and Gideon annihilated them. And this was a big part of the history of Israel. And Jonathan knew that story. So Jonathan is like, man, I know that God can do this. I know that God can do this. And so let's go out there and let's see what God's going to do. Because I know that God is all about getting these Philistines out of here. It's what he told my dad to do. Let's go and see what happens. So that's what he's doing. He's going down there. And verse 7, let me look back real quick. Yep, that's good. Verse 7, and his armor bearer, Gary, and Gary said to him, do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul. And I mean, there's so much that we can say about Gary here, the armor bearer. But I guess the thing that we need to be Garys to people, and we need to have people's backs and be there to support them. And we need to have Garys in our life, people that will support us. You know, I'm sure all of y'all have examples of when something has gone wrong, or when you've seen something go wrong and you've gone and you've supported people, or they've supported you. And it's like, you know, I got your back, you know, heart and soul. So really that verse of what Gary says there is, you know, do what you feel like you're supposed to do. Because I'm with you. I've got your back. I've got your back. I'm with you. And man, I just think that's great. And as we look at that, we all need Garys in our life. So verse 8, then Jonathan said, behold, we will cross over to the men and we will show ourselves to them. Okay. That's, if I'm going to attack somebody, especially when it's kind of a covert sneak attack and it's just two of you, I mean, the last thing I would do would be, hey, let's just go over there and say, hey, here we are, you know, because they go over there, and then when they're going down that crag, the other people can't see what's down there, and they could probably hide amongst the rocks and shadows maybe, and the sun was glistening off the rocks, so they could probably be hid pretty well. But Jonathan says, hey, we're going to go over there. We're going to go down this crag, and we're going to get down to the middle of it, and we're going to say, what are you going to do? Here we are, you know, here we are. And that's just not really good military strategy, in my opinion. But that's what Jonathan says that they're going to do. And he says, if they say to us, so when they're down, their plan was to work their way down, get into the middle, and to be seen. And this garrison is up on the top of this crag up there. And it's kind of the first line of defense for Michmash, which is, you know, about a half a mile behind this crag. He says, we're going to get down there. And those people that are in that garrison, he says, if they say, wait until we come to you there, then we will stand still in our places and we will not go up to them. Essentially, he says, if they say, hey, wait, we're going to come down there to you, then this is where we're going to stay. And this is where we're going to see what God does here. But they're saying God's going to do something if they tell us to stay. And then he says, but if they say, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be a sign to us. So the plan is that they're going to go down there, they're going to stand, and if they say come up, we're going to go up, and if they stay, we're going to stay. But whatever it is that the Lord's going to be at work there, and we're going to see what the Lord has done here. But this is one of the main reasons I use the ESV translation instead of the NLT on this one. It says, come up to us and then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hands. Are either of y'all on Blue Letter Bible? That app, Blue Letter Bible? Okay, click on that verse. Well, anyone that says Jonathan's name, I think that'd probably be verse 8. So click on verse 8, go to the interlinear translation, and then for the Hebrew word, and click on that and tell me what the definition of Jonathan is, if you can find it real quick. Do you know how to do that on Blue Letter Bible? Okay, I'll do it for you. So what you do here, Robbie, you can look here, but you click on that. Well, that's
That little thing that looks like a backwards T.
Let me find it for you real quick. But if you all have your Bibles at home or your see this little thing up here, you click on it and it says interlinear concordance. You click on that and then you scroll down and it says Jonathan. So you click on his name and you scroll down, and the definition of Jonathan is that God has given. That's what Jonathan means, is Jehovah has given, or God has given. And this is what I think this is wonderful. Jonathan says this, come up, if they say come up to us, for then we will go, for Jehovah has given my name. It's like Jonathan is saying, if that happens, then I know God is calling me by name. God knows my name. And so that's what that for the Lord has given. That's what Jonathan means. And essentially Jonathan is saying, hey, if we're going to go down there, I mean, I'm named this. The Lord has given this to me. And the thing is, man, the Lord knows your name and the Lord has called you. And sometimes he calls us into places that are hard. It was hard going down that cliff, and it was hard as they climbed up the other cliff, you know, hand over foot climbing back up it. But Jonathan firmly believes that the Lord will give it to him, and it's his name. And I think that's wonderful that he says that. I think that's really cool. So verse 11, we need to be moving on here. It says, so both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. So they go down, they're in this little crag, and they go, hey, here we are, guys, here we are. And the Philistines said, look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they had hidden themselves. And it wasn't like they were really, some people probably were hiding in caves and stuff like that all over Israel, but the people that were in this battle, for the most part, they were out in the open. And so they're really not saying, oh, they came out of their holes. They're saying the Hebrews are like animals. The Hebrews are less than people. These things that are less than people, that they live in. I mean, so they're trying to insult the Hebrew, Jonathan and Gary here. And he says, man, look at these people. I mean, they're less than people. They're animals. They're coming out of their holes. And the men of the garrison held Jonathan and his armor bearer, Jonathan and Gary, and said, hey, come up to us and we will show you a thing. Some of your translations might say we will teach you a lesson. But when you look at the Hebrew on that one, it's like, we're not just going to kill you, but we're going to do despicable things to you. We are going to, I mean, it's like what it kind of means there is we are going to torture you. You know, it's going to be worse than death if you come up here. We're going to show you a thing, or we're going to teach you a lesson. Of course, they were going to kill him, but it's more than just killing them. Hey, come up to us. We're going to show you a thing. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. So Jonathan is just not holding back. He says, all right, here we go. You come up after me, and we're going to go up to the top. Then Jonathan, verse 13, then Jonathan climbed on his hands and feet. So this isn't something that I mean, this is a cliff that you are having to climb, right? I mean, this is pretty steep. And so he climbed, and it amazes, I mean, I don't know if they were shooting arrows at him. I don't know if they were just waiting for him to get up there, but they had to climb this cliff hand and feet. So it's a pretty steep cliff, and they climb up, and his armor bearer was right after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. So what the picture is here is that Jonathan comes up and he's fighting, and the armor bearer, he's got his back. It's kind of like they're back to back, and they're working their way through this, and they're killing these people. It's like Jonathan hits one, they keep going. Oh, he's not quite dead, and they do this. And it says, so they take this spot, and it's only it says here, at that first strike with Jonathan and Gary had made, they killed about 20 men within about half a furrow's length of an acre of land. So a furrow is a distance that they race horses. So 9 furrows, you know, stuff like that. But a half of a furrow's length would be about a quarter of an acre, a half of an acre. So, so like in my house in Lubbock, I'm on a half of an acre lot. So in this, like the area where my house is, they got in this fight and they killed 20 people just in this pretty small area. They killed these 20 people. And as these two people just come in, and the thing is like I talked about the last time we met, Philistines they're known warriors. They would be like Vikings, or I mean, they're tough. I mean, they're sea people. They know how to fight. You know, Game of Thrones analogy, they would be the people from the island. You know, Theon Greyjoy and his people. You know, they're just ironborn. You know, they're fighters, and that's what they're known for. And Jonathan and Gary killed 20 of them just in a matter of moments. Verse 15, and there was panic in the camp. So you got to remember, this garrison's right here, and then less than a half a mile away is where the camp was right before Michmash. So, and you can see all this happening. You can see all this going on. And there's panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. I mean, and this isn't that they say, this is saying the earth quaked. This isn't them, oh, we're so scared. Like God literally quaked the earth when this, I mean, it was like God was like, this is me, you know, and it was like, here Jonathan and Gary are there fighting, and the Lord is like, this is what I'm doing, you know, and he shook the earth. So there was this panic that just was going on. And remember, just a mile away, Saul's sitting there on this precipice, this high point, and all of a sudden he looks out there, and a mile away, all of a sudden all these people are starting to scatter, and there's this panic, and he's like, you know, what's going on over there? The watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. I mean, they're just spreading out. They're just getting out of there. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, count and see who is gone from us. And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. So bring the troops together, figure out who's gone. Jonathan and Gary, they're not there. So Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of God here. And it's probably not the ark of God, because we know that the ark of God, like the ark of the covenant God, was on the back 40 of this other place. So what they're probably saying here is they're saying, bring the ephod, bring what we talk to God with. For the ark of God went at that time with the people of Israel. They really, all the biblical scholars really don't think that it's the ark of the covenant they're talking about. They're thinking about is the theorem and whatever the thing is that they talk to God with. So now while Saul was talking to the priests, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So it started getting crazier and crazier. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. And that's why they think that it was this a thing that they communicate to God with, because what it is these two stones, and they put their hands on them and they try to talk to God with it. So Saul's saying, hey, just take your hand off. You know, it's going crazy over there. So then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into the battle. So his 600 people that he had, they rallied and they went over to this army that was countless. And behold, every Philistine sword was against his fellow. So what that means is the Philistines were fighting each other. You know, and this isn't the first time that this has happened in Scripture, and it's not the last, where there's this confusion and all of a sudden people are fighting themselves, and the enemy is destroying themselves. So the Philistine swords were against their fellows, and there was great confusion. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time and had gone up with them into the camp, even those who had turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. So what it's saying here is that there were some Hebrews that left after that last battle and a lot of them probably defected to the Philistines. They were like, man, we're going to be on the winning side of this. And when they saw what God was doing, they felt the earthquake and all this, they were like, we're switching sides, and they began killing the Philistines too. So it just turned into this this huge massacre. Verse 22, likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim, that's this area. So there were people that had dispersed, but remember, this is only a mile. So people that were a couple of miles away, they could see what was going on. And all of a sudden they came out and they began to chase the Philistines. And they heard the Philistines were fleeing. They too followed hard after them into the battle. Verse 23. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed beyond Beth Haven. Beth Haven's about 20 miles away. And see if it's on my map that I have here. I don't see Beth Haven there, but Beth Haven's about 20 miles away, and they chased them for 20 miles. And so that's our story today. I hope you all liked it. But some of my thoughts on that is, God knows your name, and what is God calling you to do? I just think it's really neat that Jonathan's name, the Lord delivers, was essentially the sign that Jonathan gave he and his armor bearer, he and Gary, and that was it. So, and being courageous isn't a lack of fear, but what it is facing that fear and trusting in the Lord in what he's going to do. And there's all kinds of stuff in that. But do y'all have any questions or comments, or did anything stand out in that, guys? Y'all got anything, or those of y'all online, got any questions or comments about that? All right. Well, hope y'all enjoyed studying.